Looks like it's time to talk about SMT again. A series with a metric fuck ton of entries, serving all kinds of audiences. Yet few games eluded me like Soul Hackers has for a couple of years now. It being a more traditional Megaten blobber on the Saturn with a pretty unique concept and setting. One where seemingly infinite scenarios could be drawn from. Unlike my time with the first SMT, I decided to go at it blind and toss it up to poor foresight or my brain cells already being fried by Dragon Quest and modern Final Fantasy, but I ended up struggling to find enjoyment in the gameplay. Though I wouldn't go as far as calling it shit, as what I got in terms of the story and presentation was still incredibly charming, immersive, and memorable in many ways. First impression of the game was very strong. The setting of the futuristic and interconnected Amami City is ridden with undercurrents full of white, grey, and hat hackers, all striving for progress. The city itself is uncharacteristically lively, with plenty of shopping districts, clubs, and resorts that make it stand out from the normally dreary dystopian nature of most cyberpunk settings. It still takes heavy inspiration from pillars like Snow Crash, but it's all distinctly lo-fi and grungy enough for it to feel more tangible and familiar. But switch over to your computer and log on to Paradigm X to find a whole nother world.
Please get away from me.
The airplane.
Dude, back off.
There's not much to do here other than explore a small section of town. You can do a couple of things to kill time, like online gambling and collecting scrimblows. The main hook for this place is serving as a fully rendered online chat room where you can hang out at virtual beaches or countrysides, staring at the sunset with others. Later on, you'll get to do a handful of online dungeons, and I finally started to realize the similarities with something like Paradigm X and Worlds.com, especially the current state of it being dead and forgotten while still hosting servers with giant galleries and commercial buildings that feel empty and unsettlingly eerie. It's something that I already thought would make a perfect setting for a dungeon crawler, and this game taps into it directly. It might be complete conjecture, but Kaneko has stated that he was inspired by certain virtual chat rooms on Windows 95, and this matches up around that same time perfectly. Whole game just has this raw 1997 vibe to it, where everything feels grungy and loud while simultaneously mellow and cool with that Y2K aesthetic slowly creeping its way in. It's also depressing seeing this fly over people's head, just calling it a liminal VR chat or Gmod simulator. There's nothing deep or prophetic to it, I just think it managed to accidentally capture that disassociative feeling of VR and online chat rooms really well due to the Saturn's limitations. If Atlas ever tried their hands at it again proper, it would probably end up looking like Neptunia or some shit. But the less we talk about modern Atlas, the better. Rewinding the clock, going back to when the Soul Hackers was made, in those ancient, archaic days known as the pre-Nocturne era, or the pre-Persona 5 era as some would call it. Back when SMT still played like a traditional blobber where you navigate a dungeon with a party of 6, 2 humans and 4 demons you can summon. They all draw magnetite passively, so there's always a fun game of resource management being played if you aren't careful or choose to avoid combat encounters. Just like any SMT, buffs and status effects take priority overall. And this game introduces a few ones that are absolutely disgusting, like the bomb status you can only encounter in fights where there's someone ready to cast fire as soon as you're hit with it, causing you to get one-shotted with no time to react. And while this game is generally considered one of the easiest in the series, it's the one where I've gotten one hit KO'd the most. You usually give out orders to your party manually, but they've introduced a new ghost system where it allows each demon to act on its own depending on its personality type. On top of the pseudo-auto battle system, there's also a separate system that determines how they're going to act in a fight or if they'll lose or gain loyalty for you if they agree with your playstyle. These 3 layers create a web of different variables for a fight that could result in entirely different outcomes at any moment. While at first I hated how demons disobeyed me or some downright just left at a moment's notice, this was easily remedied with a bit of grinding and bribing. And you know what demons love the most, right? Saki! I think the system goes a long way with making each of your party members feel unique and memorable compared to something like Wizardry or the traditional Megaten's reliance on balancing shallow alignments or shit like Etrian Odyssey where everyone is defined by a joke name, raw stats and abilities, and how far you can take your denial of being a lolicon. This game was also made during my personal favorite era of demon designs where they took a more experimental look compared to the ones you'd see in Mainline or Persona. This absurd sense of style is seen best during the demon recruiting process where you talk to demons that can have some hilarious, raunchy, or downright shitpost levels of dialogue options. So the story's tight, combat's a blast, dungeon crawling must be pretty snappy and fun, right? By far my biggest issue with this game is just how fucking boring and basic all these dungeons are. And I'm not harping on the visuals, they're all great. The trippy Super Mario 64 dungeon when you go into a bunch of paintings and fight dolphins is probably my favorite. But these areas are just mapped out either way too big, way too linear, or have the bare minimum in terms of puzzles and obstacles which are then stretched farther than Goatsee's asshole. The game almost deceives you by starting you off in an empty office building. Naturally there's going to be a lot of empty space, like duh. Then you go to a warehouse and it's also pretty empty. Yeah, but that's fine, it's just the start of the game, right? Until you get to the Amami float where you have to backtrack across the entire building back and forth about 4 times to hit different switches to open up a single path. Places like the Algon microelectronic buildings are twice as big and just as empty. And we aren't even gonna talk about how the monolith makes you climb up a building twice over. Dungeons in Paradigm are smaller but are also pretty undercooked in my opinion. You have the aforementioned art museum where you go through a cave to talk to 4 NPCs, only to talk to them again 4 times, only to talk to each one of them a 3rd time to find a key. Then there's a haunted house that started off good conceptually before finding out that you get sent back to the exact same place over and over again unless you pick a specific path. It's unlike something you would see in Nocturne, except you do this several times over with no variation whatsoever. By the time I was done with this game, I was wishing I had to go through 400 floors of the Amala Labyrinth or an entire SMT1 dungeon made out of dark rooms. It might have not been their main focus, but for a fucking dungeon crawler, it's important that your dungeons are fun or at least challenging to go through. Then again, these are the people that made SMTF's Sloth Dungeon and the entirety of Persona 1. But enough about my bitching. I think it's time to finally address the allegations that, yes, I do think Soul Hacker's OST fucks. Like, as soon as you start the game, it just smacks you across the face with its cup. The main battle theme goes so insanely hard that it rivals the mainline tracks, with a frantic techno percussion and that quick snappy guitar riff. I also want to bring up the hyper-arranged versions of these tracks, as I feel like they're more fleshed out or maybe self-aware of the experience they highlight. The battle track in particular has this wild and frantic distorted acid bass, the sound of whirring synths rubbing up and down ad nauseum with the same riff played in the chorus being strummed just a bit harsher. All while this Joe Pesci sounding dude in the back is screaming his lungs out because his demons fucked up their go turns and he ran out of bullets. An experience I think every first timer has been through at least once. Other notable tracks are both of the airport themes. One, taking a slower approach as you take it easy in a vision quest. The light jazzy sounding keys can't help but evoke that Windows 95 retro blast feel. You know the one, the Weather Channel theme in Emplemon's videos. That one. The theme that plays when you visit IRL is a bit more lively, still maintaining the slowly rising, soothing synth harmony while upping the percussion, adding a shifting bass line and swapping the jazz keys for sharper synths to get you schmoovin'. Hyperrange sounds like fucking, I don't know, Ace Combat loadout music. Shop you go to for weapons is also chill, with a simple melody backed up by lively synths that break into an almost cold and melancholic elegy before starting over. Forum 2 has this beach house percussion sprinkled in with steel drum sounding synths. You can kinda picture yourself on a hammock and hearing the waves crash with this one. For some fucking reason I always confuse this for a plot track. Another track I want to bring up from the Arrange specifically is the EL115 remix they did. The original track is fine, but I prefer a real recording over flat MIDI. I really dig the smooth bass line paired with the clean digital keys and industrial whirring looping in and out, almost making it sound like an Akira Yamaoka track whenever he collabed with Suda and made some trip hop bangers. It's a great song to mellow out to, but I wish it had an instrumental because the added vocals make it sound like the theme of an abusive light skin in a Tyler Perry movie. Ew, what the fuck? Okay, I could talk about the music in this game for days. It's the single flawless part of this game and everybody should go check it out, and the other Range CDs they put out too. I'll keep it simple regarding the story as I wouldn't want to spoil such a short game and there's not much to cover honestly. I immediately fell in love with characters like Nemissa, obviously, as well as Lunch and Spooky just being really charismatic bros to hang around with, on top of all of them being resourceful. While some of them feel underdeveloped with a lot lot of motivational threads going nowhere, maybe save for the one that was plagiarized by a certain Earthbound-inspired RPG, they still had points in the story where their character comes through. Though all in all, I still think character designs carry for the most part. I won't let that shallowness slide for the main plot itself though. It plays out so haphazardly, juggling all these kinds of spiritual and technological concepts, all being introduced out of nowhere and then being poorly explained or just never brought up again. It feels like the team took a more vibe-based approach, with lots of overarching themes of identity and how it manifests IRL or OL, and affects interpersonal relationships, typical distrust in corporations and corruption of its users, escapism from trauma or past regrets. Nothing you haven't read in literally any other cyberpunk-adjacent novel. All the spiritual elements the series is known for isn't used past the typical techno jargon of devil summoning, as well as demons contacting us and crossing into our world, obviously. It's a bit underwhelming, seeing as how the first Devil Summoner game used its supernatural themes more effectively, and instead of marrying it with a pseudo-dystopic setting with seemingly infinite directions to go into, it's used like a tool and only a tool, save for two very specific moments that stood out to me. But I won't go into details as to not spoil the surprise. I really wish they did more with the city of Amami. It looks incredible and feels greatly lived in, but a bit of history or conspiracies rivaling the main threat could have been that piece that's missing to make this world an all-time great. As it stands, I think it's a must-play for anyone with a remote interest in cyberpunk or RPGs that have a real distinct presence and character, as I think Soul Hackers stands out on its own more than any other Megaten game in the series. Though I would hesitate to recommend it to anyone looking for a good dungeon crawling experience or a satisfying narrative with a compelling setting. Its short runtime, varied soundtrack, and gorgeous art direction make it an unforgettable experience, but it's ultimately a one and done deal and you're better off playing any mainline SMT or some of the other spin-offs before wanting to tackle it. Wait, no, not that one. No.